Welcome back to another episode of The Founder, a show that features entrepreneurs and their early stories of ingenuity, struggle, and perseverance to get their companies off the ground. We do our best to capture the uncensored, uncovered look behind the curtain into what founders really face when getting started. I'm your host, Kallaway. Our founder guest on today's episode grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and has been in and around sports his entire life. After playing baseball throughout college and looking for another opportunity to compete in the professional world, he discovered startups and has been working on various businesses over the past decade, all at the center of sports and media. As he consistently heard the traditional sports media companies talk about the decreasing fandom for younger generations, he knew there was an opportunity. What he knew that they missed was that fandom had never been stronger. It had just shifted to the rapidly emerging social and digital platforms. This was the key insight that inspired WaveTV. Today, at WaveTV, this founder and his team are building a next-generation sports media company. They produce content across 20 brands, including Break Ankles Daily for basketball lovers, Dingers for baseball fanatics, and Oddballs for all the sports you didn't know you needed. Their content is specifically created for those digital and social platforms like Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube, because that's where the next generation of fans are consuming content. Over the last 3 years, they've gone sport by sport and fandom by fandom to build their impressive portfolio. It's a fairly simple playbook, but one that they have executed masterfully as they have seen parabolic growth in 2020. This is an inspiring interview that shines a spotlight on the future of sports media and a company that celebrates fandom everywhere in the world. I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. Now introducing the co-founder of WaveTV, Brian Verne. Let's get it. Brian, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for coming on.
I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to talking to you today. So before we dive into the origin story and kind of your background for Wave, I would love to just get an anchor point or a snapshot of where the business is today. So for people who don't know and might not have heard of it, can you just talk through quickly, like what's the vision and mission for Wave, the products effectively that you guys sell or go to market with today, and kind of how big you are with any KPI that you use to define growth?
Yeah, I'll spend a few minutes and just kind of talk you through the general backstory and manifestation of Wave TV, and then we can dive into perhaps some more details thereafter. But we started the company about 3 years ago now, and I always tell folks, I think at the time, this was about June of 2017, there was a really simple but also very massive misconception within the kind of sports media industry at large, where insiders were saying that sports fandom amongst this next generation is decreasing, when sure, like I think at this point it's a reality that sports television viewership is going down, and it has kind of year over year for the last however many years. But from our vantage point, we saw sports fandom, really at an all-time high. It had just shifted to those core and emerging social and digital platforms, the Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, a handful of others. So kind of going into it, with that mindset, as a precursor, so to speak, we then took this approach that, sport in and of itself is inherently global. It is, this universal language that is spoken by a lot of different types of people, all over the world. And so as a result, there are literally dozens, if not hundreds, of these unique fandoms that exist and manifest, globally. Everything from a more traditional sport to non-traditional sports to emerging sports and categories to anything you could possibly imagine in between. And so our playbook has really been kind of simple in the sense that we have just kind of gone down the list, call it sport by sport or fandom by fandom, to build this portfolio of digitally native media brands that have been built squarely for those social and digital platforms where today's fan lives. We then spent really the better part of the last 3 years really mastering the different programming formats. So what I mean by that is really understanding, the details and the nuance that goes into developing a successful Snap Discover show or Instagram TV episode, or just kind of short form social or digital video in and of itself. Then the third and perhaps most important piece of the equation in some cases was how do we layer in great IP? And so again, we took this approach that there are all these different leagues and rights holders and just kind of IP holders, all of whom are having an increasingly more difficult time reaching the younger fan because television viewership is down, but they have amazing IP, particularly highlights and in a lot of cases decades worth of archives. So we saw this really unique window of opportunity to just reimagine that existing IP into new hit programming that is naturally going to be formatted for the platforms where our portfolio of media brands live. So the outcome looks a lot less like an hour-long television show and looks a lot more like that 3-minute Snap Discover episode or IGTV episode, what have you. And so it turns out that that playbook has worked really, really effectively. We have about 20 different media brands within our portfolio, everything from your more traditional sports to gaming and esports, to cheerleading, to gymnastics, to a show or a media brand called Oddballs, which is focused on like the most obscure non-traditional sports you can even imagine. So it's a lot of fun, and it the breadth of programming really enables us to appeal to a lot of different types of people all over the world, with different sensibilities and different interests. And that was always the thesis, from the onset. As far as some of the other details in the company, I think I mentioned we're about 3 years old, about 50 full-time employees, most of whom are based, where I am now in Santa Monica, but with some team members in London focused on international football, some team members in New York, and then some folks who contribute to our programming, really all over the world.
And to give a sense, I mean, you guys are putting up crazy numbers. I just saw like a LinkedIn post when you guys raised. Can you just characterize how much traffic you're getting across these brands? And like for someone at home who those massive millions of views might not resonate, like compare that to a more legacy media provider just to contextualize how big Wave has gotten already.
Yeah. So, in broad strokes, we, have about 65, or so odd million followers or subscribers across, our portfolio, of which is predominantly, on Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, and Facebook, more recently launching on YouTube as well. We reach about a couple 100 million young sports fans every single month. Our audience is predominantly that highly elusive, quote unquote, Gen Z and millennial sports fan. And, we do now upwards of 3.5 billion or so, video views every single month. So to your point, it is, quite significant scale. I can't share, some exact specifics, but, if you look, some of the data around, unique viewership on, your more traditional, linear television programming. And then you look at some of the unique viewership, not just with us, but even with some of our contemporaries when it comes to an episode across social or digital media. While on one hand, it's not totally apples to apples, I think the main kind of underlying point is that this is truly where this next generation has migrated towards for their kind of television or entertainment needs. And so a lot of the same principles apply, whether that be the type of storytelling or the type of formats that you use. It's just being adaptable to where today's fan is really going.
Definitely. Yeah, I think that's a great anchor point, and will definitely be a jumping off point as we get into it. So I'd love to rewind the clock a little bit. And I know sports and baseball has been in your DNA from day one. So do you want to just share with the audience what your background is, what you grew up doing, and kind of how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, I think sport has always been just a massive part of both my personal and professional life. I think like a lot of kids, grew up, uh, playing something every single day, and then, was fortunate enough to, play baseball, all the way through college. And, after finishing, graduating from Oberlin College back in 2009, I think like a lot of, at that point, former college athletes or former kind of athletes in general, you're looking for this, alternative arena, in which to compete, be able to unleash, those, competitive juices, if you will. And I don't know if I necessarily knew this at the time, but certainly, thinking about it in hindsight, or or retrospectively, being able to jump into, that entrepreneurial community, while it's not, exactly the same thrill of, making a great play, or, getting a clutch hit. The ability to compete, day in and day out, when trying to build a company successfully, and trying to, to be a leader, and motivate and empower people, can certainly draw some parallels to, uh, my, actual sports experience. So moved back to Cleveland, Ohio, and just kind of jumped, right into, kind of entrepreneurial path or journey, of which, now it's hard to believe, but for the last, 11 or so odd years, have been doing, different startups, and, pursuing different endeavors, interestingly enough, all kind of at the intersection of, that young athlete, young sports fan, new and emerging media. And so I think a lot of what we're doing now is, certainly a byproduct of, those learnings and those experiences, and, being able to develop, insights, or theses around a particular category, having, lived it first, as an athlete, and then, over the last decade or so, pursuing, these different entrepreneurial ventures.
Definitely. Yeah, we love Northeast Ohio representation for sure. When I think about the audience for this, there are a lot of people who just love checking out new brands and learning about new companies, but there's also a lot of people who listen that are either currently founders or aspiring founders. And I think like tactical advice is super helpful. So when you think back to when you guys were starting Wave TV, like what were the first few steps that you took? Did you build a production house on your side and actually manufacture that first couple brands within the specific fandoms you wanted to go under, or through? Talk about that a little bit and how you got started.
Yeah, we had a few guys, a few angel investors, one in particular, who, I mean, this is the earliest of the earliest days. So, you're talking an idea and kind of a shell of a concept. And, thankfully he took a shot on, Ishan, my co-founder, and and said at the time it was really just this kind of deeply rooted thesis in, the idea that, the media landscape, and, the sports media landscape in particular, was in the midst of this like massive paradigm shift. And, again, because of the early nature of it, it kind of boiled down to a lot of, what ifs. But, I think, the what ifs were exciting enough that if we could even accomplish some of it, sports media has always been just a massively valuable industry. So, given the nature of our business, we had felt like there was this kind of once in a generation window to, develop these digitally native brands on these platforms, or in these places where, the younger fan, was really migrating towards. And also felt like there was this kind of phenomena where you saw, young creatives, and kind of the next generation of storytellers and producers who, had this, or have this innate understanding of these platforms, which makes them, some of the best storytellers in the world, for, the mobile device, or for, the social platform. So we were able to catalyze some of those voices and some of those individuals, and like I said, just kind of started going, vertical by vertical, or sport by sport rather, to, develop some proof of concept, and build, some meaningful level of critical mass when it came to audience, to kind of showcase to our earliest investors that, there was some merit to, our initial hypothesis. And fortunately, I think we executed pretty well, which then enabled us to, start to raise, some more proper, VC, or institutional capital, to continue to scale upon the vision and thesis.
Yeah, I'd love to dive into you mentioned it before, like a lot of the IP and essentially the moat around what you built is the partnerships and relationships with the leagues that allows you to utilize and leverage some of that content. And I know some leagues like NBA are super progressive in terms of wanting to share their content and people to like repurpose it versus leagues like the MLB who aren't as liberal with that. Talk about kind of that partnership strategy and some things that you've done that have worked to make that work for WaveTV.
Yeah, I mean, I think in layman's terms, and this is really how we always communicate it, to our existing partners and uh, our prospective partners, is there is really a first order effect and kind of second order effect to these these relationships. That first order effect is really just simply in line with our mission and our purpose as a company, which is to champion fandom. And so, kind of rewinding, a few minutes ago, when I was kind of walking through just the basics of the business, whether it be a more traditional sport or rights holder or non-traditional or kind of emerging sport or category, felt like there was a couple of like the same kind of underlying truths in the sense that they have existing IP, which we felt like we could reimagine into new stories or new programming that would just be formatted for the platforms where this audience lives. And by being able to demonstrate a massive audience as well as call it efficacy and understanding the programming formats and really understanding how to deliver storytelling that is resonant with this fan, that would inherently increase or champion fandom, which for generations on end, regardless of the type of media, the higher the fandom, the higher the enterprise value for the sport or for that stakeholder. So that's kind of that first order effect. We increase enterprise value, or excuse me, we increase fandom, which increases enterprise value. Then that second order effect, which I think is probably been fast forwarded a little bit, especially due to COVID, is the commercial opportunity or the mutually beneficial kind of revenue opportunities. So again, because we have such scale, we're able to position this as a simple but also viable alternative to the sports TV buy or the traditional sports sponsorship spend. So take a rights holder X who has brand Y or brand Z as a sponsor. We're talking an industry where tens of billions of dollars flow through it annually. We see this as an opportunity for those rights holders or for those sponsors to reach a net new audience that is predominantly younger, that Gen Z and millennial fan that is on social, mobile, and digital. And so that's been I think a pretty powerful message or a good recipe that we've been able to to execute quite well with our partners. And at the end of the day, like being able to entertain this next generation of sports fans and extend the value of of their IP.
That's awesome. One topic that I love to get into on the show is kind of customer acquisition and marketing. So when you think about customer acquisition for your business, I feel like you have two main sources. Like one is like the partnerships and trying to find those communities and those like leaders in the communities within the fandoms. And the other is the actual users who are consuming the content. So how do you think about going after those two groups? Obviously one is more the partnership side, but have you guys tried anything from a marketing perspective that's like super out of the box or anything that you'd share?
I mean, if we're talking about purely the fan, yeah, I think that the beauty of this is it's based on developing really quality programming. And so, we felt like across a variety of different fandoms, this fan was being underserved in the platforms that they very loudly and clearly said that they're spending their time on. And so by just being able to develop programming, given that a lot of these platforms are, algorithmically driven or discovery based, and then very much, discovery based based on different types of communities. It just has inherently allowed us to, to grow, um, you know, pretty quickly across all different types of sports, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Another topic I usually talk about on the show is around competition. I think you've hit it well in that the future of media is completely getting turned on its head. I personally think that the main two drivers of media, sports and beyond, is like the influencer type person that a community can be built around, and then the community slash, you guys call it, fandom itself. And I'm curious from your perspective, maybe bubbling up beyond just wave and sports media, when you think about like attention, there's such a finite amount of time, and people are getting competing priorities from family, work, sports, news, social. There's so many outlets. How do you see that evolving in the future? Like how does wave, or even broadly the sports category, carve that out? Do you just see that continuing being able to grow, or is it going to keep getting fragmented across all these channels? What do you think?
I mean, if the question is whether, sports fandom is going to sustain itself or continue to grow, I think the answer is yes. Just because I think, even going back 100 years, and you look at the kind of the shifts of how media was being created or consumed, from generation to generation. I think that, our worldview is that the fandom has always existed. It's just been a matter of the content provider, or the media companies and the publishers evolving, or new ones starting to kind of adapt to the consumer's behavior, and where they're spending their time. So uh, on that front, I think fandom will continue to exist and sustain itself, and probably continue to grow, especially as it becomes kind of more democratized, in the sense that it's not just the big four, the big five sports that are dominating folks' attention. And that gets back to really a lot of our bread and butter is like, sure, being in the space, do you inherently have to cover and develop programming around those big four, those big five, and those traditional sports? Absolutely. And that's a big part of our strategy. But at the same time, being able to elevate more non-traditional sports, or more emerging sports and categories, or even introduce something that might be wildly popular internationally to a North American or American audience, it creates a lot more programming types for people to consume, which I think leads to an increase in fandom at large.
Totally. I think those non-traditional sports are so underserved. Like you can make the case that the millennial Gen Z demographic for the majors are underserved, and that means the non-traditional have like nothing. When you think about the growth over the past 3 years, did you notice any like significant spike, whether it was like one of your brands or specific like viral moments, whether it was content you guys produced or like time in the world that really like was a step change for that growth trajectory? Or has it truly just been like brick by brick, kind of linear-ish throughout this period?
It's a good question. I mean, I think there's definitely probably been some sports or categories that have grown a little bit more quickly. Uh, of late, I know that our combat sports programming, and Haymakers, which is our brand for combat, has done incredibly well. And then I look at, whether it be women's sports. We have a show and a brand that originated on Snap, called Phenoms. Whether it be adaptive athletes, athletes with disabilities, we have a great partnership with the International Paralympic Committee, and being able to tell stories about those amazing athletes that maybe haven't been told it, the ways that they should have been. That type of programming does really, really well. Strongman competitions, fitness, weightlifting. I could continue to go down the list. I think the point is sports it's entertainment, it's escapism. If it's a great moment, so long as the storytelling is of high quality, and then being able to kind of compound that with our understanding of the programming formats, it's kind of leveled the playing field to a degree, where we've seen really high performance across the entire portfolio. and a breadth of fandoms.
Yeah, what I love about it is like when we were growing up, the only way to discover these like non-traditional sports were either like you were watching Sports Center and they like snuck in a 2 minute segment, or you pressed menu and were like flipping through and just saw something on a random channel. But that's like there's pretty low discovery. But now with all these social channels, if the algorithms hit right, you can just be shown pieces of content from these shows, and the discovery, the friction is so much less.
That's right.
One more question before we dive into more like the personal learnings is around like manifesting kind of the future vision. So you guys have obviously come really far in 3 years, but if you were to think about like 3 to 5 years from now, what do you see Wave TV being when it grows up, so to speak?
That one, I don't know if I want to
Some secrets?
pull back the curtain too much just yet.
Yeah, fair. We got some big things in the works then. Sounds good. More viewership, we'll say.
That's right.
Okay, shifting to some of these other questions. So, first one that I love to ask is around hiring. My thesis on hiring is that it's the most important thing you can do. And when you bring on like superstar people who are ready to kind of run things almost entrepreneurially on their own, it just drives the ship so much faster. So, from your perspective, what characteristics do you look for when you hire, and what have been the consistent qualities across the superstars that you found?
Yeah, I mean, on one hand, it's I think it's varied a little bit depending on the discipline. This is more generalist or in broad strokes, but what we look for are one folks that are just genuinely nice people. That might sound cliche, but there are a lot of assholes out there. I think time is your most valuable asset. So I don't really care how talented you are. If you're an asshole, you're probably not going to get a job uh, at our company. Um, and then folks that are just willing to kind of run through a wall and just are gonna deliver on what they say they're gonna do. That goes a long way, but a lot of this isn't rocket science. It's being able to kind of persevere and demonstrate the mental fortitude to be able to kind of weather the storm and go through the ebbs and flows, and that takes a unique character trait.
When you think about, going back to what I said before about a lot of founders on here appreciate super tactical advice, and any tips you could share around investor lessons learned, either, pitches that went your way or not. What are some takeaways? I know you've done a lot of these pitches and raised a lot of money. What would you say to an aspiring founder for things to look for?
I think a big part of it is is being able to control the narrative, and I would say there are some inherent boxes that you probably need to be able to check if you're at a point where you feel like someone should be writing you a check and investing in your company. And I learned a lot of this the hard way, because I went into it completely naive and very much cold over a decade ago. So it's kind of baptism by fire to a certain extent. But I think the givens should be being able to just easily articulate with a lot of confidence and a lot of clarity just what you do. Be able to speak to the size of the market, and that really brings up some nuance as to, are you developing a company that is truly venture scale, or are you developing a company that might be more of a lifestyle business? And there's nothing wrong with either of them, but if you're developing something that has kind of a smaller market size, you should probably know your audience, and probably shouldn't go speak to an investor or VC that is looking for a venture scale return. And then just being able to speak very clearly as to how it makes money, or maybe you're already at a point where you've already started to demonstrate some initial traction as to to how it makes money, and being able to speak to the roadmap and what this might look like, and kind of the step-by-step process that you've taken or that you're going to take to get there. And I think the final piece is a very clear ask. So I'm raising X amount of money, and it's going to be deployed across A, B, and C. And if we do this effectively, we expect that to get us this particular outcome. And it's really not that much more complicated than that. It certainly evolves a bit as you get as the company scales and you start to get more and more traction, becomes weirdly a little bit of an easier, kind of more linear story to tell, less subjective and more just about what are the kind of key metrics that drive the business, and then how are we going to pull levers to continue to focus and increase those month over month or quarter over quarter. So hopefully that's somewhat helpful.
Yeah, it's funny how the smaller checks at the beginning are the hardest to get, and you're just like, you need people to take a bet on you, and a lot of, like you said, a lot of what ifs at the very early stages. So kind of on the other side of that coin, I like to ask about mentor advice as well. Doesn't have to be investors, but what are some things, pieces of advice you learned along the way from different mentors you've had that have kind of impacted you or changed your approach on things?
Yeah, I mean, I'll keep this pretty simple, but one, and not that this is just limited to the sports industry, but I think it is, paramount if you want to have a career in this industry is, relationships are everything, and just, be nice to people, and you never know when that individual or that group is going to kind of come back around at some point or time. And so, I've always made it a point, not that I'm perfect by any means, but to treat people well and not burn any bridges. The other thing would be and deliver on what you say you're going to do. I think that earning, again, it kind of ties back to the first piece to an extent, but earning the trust of people and people around you, whether it's near or from afar. You develop a reputation that you deliver on what you say you're going to do, then people trust you, and good things typically happen. And then the last one, which maybe it's especially over the years, it's become even more and more important to me. But I think in business there is, I think there's a world, and we probably need more of this considering the state of the world that we live in. But I think there is an opportunity to do good and do well at the same time. It doesn't have to just be a very kind of mercenary, capitalist-driven approach. Like, yes, at the end of the day, you start a business to make money and hopefully make more money every day or every month or every year than you spent, so that you can make a profit. But what's really important to Ishan and myself and our team is this idea of doing good and doing well, instilling the right type of values and principles across our organization, which I ultimately think that yields the best of the best companies when you're able to accomplish both those things at the same time.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's funny when you it's pretty simple, like be a good person, do the right thing, do what you say you're gonna do. But like sometimes people complicate it so much.
People overcomplicate it so much, man. We're taught most of these things in like kindergarten.
I know.
That's the irony.
It's true. The golden rule. That's true. All right, a couple kind of back to back for you that are kind of more fun. And I say this with a caveat: you likely had to go through all the struggles you went through to get to where you are. It's usually the answer. But if you could teleport back to the first couple months, let's say like first couple months 11 years ago when you were just starting out as an entrepreneur, and then let's say first couple months of Wave, what would you tell yourself then?
Oh man, that it was going to take 11 years to begin to figure
Start balling.
Seriously, I didn't even realize, and this was probably both a good and a bad thing, that I was so dumb and naive. I didn't realize like how much went into this and how difficult it was. So on one hand, that I think enabled me to not have that kind of sobering moment early on, of which could have resulted in quitting. So I think at the end of the day, I appreciate the whole path thus far, and there's still a lot of work to do. But I'd be BSing you if I said I thought it would take 11 years to at least begin to figure things out a little bit.
Yeah. it's funny how like on Twitter and all these places, you see all these entrepreneurs being like, all right, if you're going to start, like it's going to be the next 10 years. And I bet 95% of the people that start are like, oh, I can do this in 5 years. And then like it always ends up taking these crazy turns and takes a while. But
Yeah.
when you think about kind of where the company is just like today, and this is kind of a peek into, you know, your process, what do you think are your biggest challenges right now? Like no need to disclose anything proprietary, but like when you think about it as a leader and trying to guide the company, what are the 1 to 2 things that kind of keep you up at night?
Focus and prioritization. And as we continue to grow at a rapid pace, that then presents itself with a series of unknowns, you know, for me, where you're tackling new problems that you just haven't done before. And so you're like admitting to the people around you, like, hey, I don't really know how to do this. So can you help me? And then surround ourselves with the right types of people that can do so. But back to the initial point, just I think focus and prioritization is paramount.
Got it. All right, we're going to shift into this section I like to call the wellness corner, which, you know, the impetus for this was I think of wellness as like a stack. So I think fitness, sleep, nutrition, you know, mindfulness, if you do it, all those things combine together to create like a compounding effect in my mind. So what I like to do in this section is I'll just go through a couple aspects of wellness and would love to just get your take on, you know, what you think about it, what you do day to day, if you use any products or brands. So the first one is morning routine. Do you have a set morning routine or not? And what's your thoughts on that?
Started to get more consistency, especially during COVID. Wake up at 6-ish, feed the dogs, and then either walk down to the beach and work out or grab a coffee and take some phone calls and then work out thereafter. So that allows me to like clear my head and kind of get the day started on a good note early on.
Yeah, there's worse ways to live for sure. Sounds like a pretty good routine. Second one's around like nutrition, eating. If you do fasting, do you have any like set things you keep there, or it kind of just ebbs and flows?
Nah, honestly, I'm probably lucky. I have a good metabolism. By most people's standards, I probably don't eat very well.
On the fitness working out side, do you have any like types of working out that you stick to consistently, or just kind of whatever you're feeling that day?
Just run a lot now. Yeah, after playing, baseball competitively for so long, like every so often I'll get like the itch to get in the gym and lift weights and this and that, but I don't do that as much as I used to. So I run probably 5-6 days a week and log some pretty decent miles, and we'll do some push-ups and some plyometric type stuff to stay fit. But the days of me like trying to bulk up are probably slim to none.
Yeah, those 315 bench days are long behind us. The last one in this little section is content diet. So on the micro side, like newsletters, email lists, or anything you consume kind of daily, and then on the longer term side, any books you'd recommend?
Yeah, I mean, I read a lot of news. Starting to think maybe too much. Starting to get a little depressing. But yeah, I read a lot of news, 4 or 5 different papers for current events and this and that. And then that's a big part of the morning routine, honestly. Try to be, as well read as possible to know what's going on around us. So on that front, I'm probably pretty well informed.
All right, 3 questions left for you, and then we'll get you out of here. The first one is around kind of exciting trends. So obviously you're in the sports media space all day, and you guys are kind of the leaders in that space anyway. But externally with all the reading you do and just in the startup ecosystem, are there any, if you put your consumer hat on or investor hat potentially, any like exciting trends that you're pumped for over the next couple of years that you would either just love to use and try or invest in?
I think that there is still a lot of growth on the e-commerce front. And I think some of that will be dictated by what happens with some of these platforms, even some of the ones that we live on. You are starting to see them roll out more direct integrations to, encourage, shopping within, the app or within the platform. And I've always been really bullish on that concept of, of going, direct to the consumer. I think the proliferation of 5G and, more and more folks getting access to quality internet or better bandwidth is going to open up a multitude of opportunities, especially globally. And you're seeing massive investments in infrastructure, whether that be in Africa or Southeast Asia, which only lends itself to growth. And in many ways, like, you're still in the early days, but there's just so many people in those different pockets all over the world where I think there's just a massive amount of upside and opportunity. So those are a few that that come to mind.
For sure. Yeah, 5G is gonna change the game. I think it's gonna be exciting to see what happens. All right, so final two questions. We ask these to every guest, so I'm pumped to get your take on these. First one, a lot of what you'll probably say was littered in some of your other answers, but if you had to write a startup manifesto with 5 of the most important key lessons or pitfalls to avoid when starting out, what would they be?
I think of it less as pitfalls, but more so, and again, to your point, I think probably touched on a lot of this, over the last, 45 minutes or so. But the importance of being nice to people. Things are going to take a lot longer than you probably expected. In line with, treating people well and being nice to people, truly valuing, and I mean this like every single relationship, with, the utmost importance, because you never know when that individual is going to come back and into your life. And the last one, which I really pride myself on, is just delivering on what you say you're going to do. That, I think, is so important. You can draw so many different use cases, from that one statement, both personally and professionally. But if you deliver on your word and and you're reliable and you're trustworthy, I think that more often than not, you're going to end up doing well, both in business and in life.
Well said. I totally agree. I feel like more and more these days, I'm like, God, why can't people just do what they say they're going to do? Like, if they just finish what they committed to.
It's crazy.
Yeah. All right. So the second question we ask everybody, this has been a phenomenal way for the show to grow. And we've gotten some great nominations. So it's your turn to nominate another founder that's either a friend, colleague, or mentor of yours that you'd like to see on the show in the future.
Yeah, I have a few folks in mind, but maybe I can get back to you and connect you to a handful of folks offline if that works.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. We won't make you publicly call someone out here. That's perfect. Cool. So before I let you go, I just want to acknowledge you for a second, and I do this with all my guests. Obviously I'm hosting this, but I'm also a huge fan and just listener of the journey. And I think for you, what's really inspiring to me is a couple of things. The persistence. I know it's been a long road. It's been a grind, and you're one of the more persistent people I've ever met to continue battling. And where you guys are now is it's amazing. The other thing is like loyalty. I think you've been super mission driven on sports and the fan, like fighting for the fan this entire time. And so I think a lot of times people will pick a mission and try to reverse engineer like what they think an opportunity is. But for you, you've been in this space forever and took it the other way, found a way to make it work. And so, if people take nothing away other than those things, I think it'll be a worthwhile conversation. And I just want to, say thanks again for coming on. And I'm a huge fan and we'll continue to be a supporter of WaveTV in the future.
Thanks so much, man. I appreciate you.
For sure. Brian Verne, founder of WaveTV. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to that episode with Brian Verne of WaveTV. If you're loving the show and want to support, there's a couple quick, completely free things you could do that would really help us out. 1, subscribe to our show on Apple Podcasts. When you go on Apple Podcasts, please leave us a 5-star rating and a couple sentence positive review on why the show inspired you. These ratings and reviews are super important, and they signal to Apple that they should put our show in front of other people that might like it. 2, Follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Founder Podcast. Each week we put out teasers, audio clips, and important quotes from the episode. And lastly, check out our website as a mission control for the show. Go to thefounderpod.com. We have a page on there called Special Offers where we link up discount codes from our founders' companies, as well as the books and resources that have been recommended. I hope you enjoyed that episode and are looking forward to the next one. Until then, I'm Kallaway, and this is The Founder.